Don't try to ghost bust me. Busting made me feel good once. Once. Jay here with Nerd Rage Against the Machine, and today, this is a video I've been wanting to make for a little while after I finally watched Ghostbusters Afterlife, but I'm also kind of dreading, because I think this is the video that's going to get the most negative feedback, most anger, most ire, really. But I also feel like I have to make it. It's something where, you know, it's a good movie. Ghostbusters is one of those things that's just part of that 80s culture, and definitely, you know, love it or hate it, it's in that zeitgeist. And I've had my fair share of experiences with the movies, the TV shows, the toys, the cartoons, the comic books, the RPGs, etc. So, as I stated, I really recently watched Ghostbusters Afterlife, and it dawned on me that there's one real problem with this franchise. One big problem, specifically the movie franchise. And it stems to all the prequels. So before I start, I'm just going to say this out front. I'm good with every film in the series. I really am. I don't hate them. I can think of way worse films, and that includes the 2016 one. So you're going to hear me talk positively about the 2016 Ghostbusters, and I'm sure that there are some people out there who are now screaming, yelling, throwing their keyboards, etc. over that. Look, it was not nearly as bad as people made it out to be. Sorry, it's just the way it is. I can think of multiple movies I would rather not watch than rewatch Ghostbusters 2016. So, with that being said, let me explain my actual problem with all the Ghostbusters sequels, and that is that every time they've done one, they've tried to reinvent the wheel. And what I mean by that is, let's start at the beginning. So the first Ghostbusters was, again, a good film. It was, I think, no better than, say, Stripes, Blues Brothers, Animal House, and a lot of other of those comedies that were made in that same time by a lot of those same people. However, it did have a few things that the others didn't. One being the push then for an animated series, and of course, it was more toyetic. I mean, nobody really banged on the door for Stripes action figures or Animal House figures. Nobody wanted a belching Blutarsky toy. But, you know, who doesn't want Venkman and Stans and Egon and Winston and all the ghosts, especially Slimer, right? So, saying that, after the show came out, of course, we got the animated series, The Real Ghostbusters. And The Real Ghostbusters does what a lot of good television shows did, which is it made it a franchise. It made it something that people think about. Look at something like MASH as a perfect example. You know, most people, when you talk about MASH, you think of Alan Alda and Mike Farrell and other actors who were in that, more than you think of like Elliot Gould and Donald Sutherland. Same with like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. You've got 2 hours of film versus 7 seasons and 5 seasons of a spin-off. And when people talk about Buffy, you're more likely to hear arguments about Spiker Angel, who was her best Scooby Gang member. You know, should Willow have stayed with I can't think of the kid's name, Seth Green's character, or should she have stayed with Tara? You know, but you don't hear people talking about Pike or Donald Sutherland's Watcher nearly as much as you hear talk about the show. And this is true with Ghostbusters as well. The animated series was popular enough. In fact, Retro Blasting brought this up, the fact that there was never a set of Ghostbusters action figures. The action figures that came out originally, now there have been some new ones I know, but in the time frame, in the 80s, the only action figures you could get were the real Ghostbusters, the animated series versions. I mean, this looks nothing like Bill Murray. I'm sorry, it doesn't. And this looks nothing like Dan Aykroyd. And no Harold Ramis here. Ernie Hudson? Not really, no. But the thing is that the show worked on a couple levels. One, as most TV shows, it's simply more accessible. You know, you watched it every Saturday or every weekday, depending upon where you live, where it was on syndication, versus, you know, that having to spend money to go sit in a dark room and watch it. Now that makes the Ghostbusters movies obviously more of an event, but there seemed to be more story, more depth, more just pure material to the show. And therefore the show kind of took on a life of its own, more so than the movies. So after the first film, and again it was successful, the first film was great, the animated series was also successful, we got the first sequel. And the first sequel does exactly what I'm talking about. They tried to reinvent the wheel. They decided that even though the Ghostbusters had saved New York, had invented a whole new level of technology, proved that ghosts were real, all this kind of just goes away. You know, they've lost their license to ghost bust. Nobody seems interested in this tech at all. And you have, you know, Stans and Winston doing kids' parties whilst having other side hustles, and same with the rest of them. Until, of course, New York is attacked again, and they're needed, etc., etc. But again, we have to rebuild the team. We have a point where there are no Ghostbusters. We can't start this, you know, with the idea that this has now become normal. No, it's gotta, you know, we've got to start fresh. We've got to have everybody, you know, scattered to the four winds, then come together. Which then brings me to the 2016 film, and I'm starting to wonder if this wasn't a studio mandate, you know, that we want to start fresh, especially with the 2016 one, where, you know, one, you had, you know, Bill Murray was a pretty big star at that time, and openly feuding with Harold Ramis. You know, the idea of getting them together for a third film was kind of tough, but also, and you see this now with the Marvel movies, they're getting older, they're not spring chickens anymore, and how many more films can we make? Now, you can complain all you want about their casting choices. I mean, but again, if they're going to remake it, you know, what else could they have done but started with new characters? I mean, they could have, again, you know, I don't know, cast Chris Pratt as Venkman, Jack Black as Ray, Jim Parsons as Egon, and then, you know, Chris Tucker as Winston, and called it a day. But it still would have looked like a cheap knockoff. It still would have looked like another, you know, just a rip-off of the original Ghostbusters. You know, and a rehash. And again, we need another rehash, like we need a hole in the head. If you're making a Star Trek movie, directors of the world, don't remake Wrath of Khan, please. We're done with it. Same thing's true here. So the other thing I would say about the 2016 one that I think is important to bring up too is that I think there was some really good plot in this movie. And what I mean by this is, if you think about, one of the things about the first Ghostbusters is the randomness of the fact that, thank God, we came up with ghostbusting technology at the same time that Ivo Shandor's huge prophecy / ceremony finally paid off. You know, if they'd have been cut from the university a month earlier and gone their separate ways, the world would have been doomed. Thank God that didn't happen. It was that lucky coincidence. Where in the 2016 film, the uptick of ghosts is because the two main characters, Kristen Wiig and God, I can't think of the actress's name now. Melissa McCarthy had come up with this technology and had written down the theories, and somebody else had used their crib notes for evil, which kind of prompts the up of ghosts, which again makes sense. That, you know, there's a cause and effect that the original Ghostbusters simply didn't have, and in that respect, I think there was some cool things in that movie. It's not as bad as people think, but again, it does suffer from the same problem. We're just gonna cut from cloth a brand new set of Ghostbusters and call it a day. We're not going to bring back, or we're not even going to assume that the universe continued. much like the animated series had. At least in the animated series, we'd seen what happens if they'd been allowed to continue. And now we get to Afterlife. And I enjoyed Afterlife for the most part, but this film felt so much like a hard push toward nostalgia that it was almost painful. One big steaming bowl of Memba berries. Remember the Ecto-1? Hey, remember Ghost Traps? I remember. I mean, again, we dig back to the well of Ivo Shandor. Now he had this small town in the middle of nowhere as a backup plan. Egon was the only one who knew that. He breaks with the other Ghostbusters, who again all go their separate ways so that they're not together. And Egon was prepping for this huge emergency, which then happens. And it's his progeny or it's his grandkids who really do most of the work in the film. But in the film, they again kind of play it like, nobody's heard of these guys. Paul Rudd makes a huge point about, that's a great replica of a ghost trap. Have you, what's a ghost trap? You don't know about the Ghostbusters? And then he shows them like a YouTube video, like this is all, fraught in legend. I mean, think about some events that have happened in our lives. World War II. We're still feeling the effects of World War II today. Nobody's going, that's a swastika. You don't know about World War II? Yeah, you do. I mean, it's common knowledge. 9/11, same thing. Someone mentions the World Trade Center. Nobody goes, what's a World Trade Center? You've never heard of 9/11? It's such an ingrained part of our culture that you're not getting away with it or getting by with it. And the same thing's true here. I would think that saving the Earth, moving the Statue of Liberty would at least, be remembered by multiple generations, not fade into obscurity. And I think that's the thing that really kind of got me with that movie. It was not a terrible movie. It was good. It had some fun moments. At the same time, it just really felt like they were trying so hard to slam home the nostalgia factor. And without going into too many more spoilers on it, that would be my biggest complaint. And really where it wasn't nostalgia, it felt like an attempt to try to do a Stranger Things feel, which, with Finn Wolfhard in there was part of that, but the whole, mysteries of this small town, nobody believing it, it just felt a little forced. Personally, if I were going to do a Ghostbusters movie, what I would love to have seen, and I don't know if it could be done now, because we'd have to probably ignore the last one or two to make it work, would have been, get somebody like a Jesse Eisenberg to play a young Oscar Barrett who is, overeducated and underemployed. Maybe he's lost his last research job or what have you. He goes to his mother who consoles him and suggests, you can always find a job with your dad. Boom, we find out that Oscar really is Venkman's son. Nothing like Venkman, but he is Venkman's son. And then he's, brought into the family business. And we pull back to this idea of a blue-collar job with a high-tech sci-fi edge to it, which is really what the original film did well. Make it so that he's now, the trainee, the greenhorn on the, in the crew. He gets the night crew. Maybe hire someone like Aubrey Plaza to play Egon's daughter, who's there as a researcher. You could have a cameo of Bill Murray, pardon me, or Dan Aykroyd as the famous versions of themselves. They're retired. They've got it. He's got one of them's living the high life, what have you. And make a good movie out of something like that. And I think that's really where, because the show kind of created that idea of an extended universe, that every sequel then cutting that at its knees has been a real problem. And again, I don't want this to come off as I hate any of the Ghostbusters movies. I think they were all pretty good. I really do. I think that the show was decent. The movies were decent. But I do think that, again, the hatred of any of them was overblown. But, again, if there's a problem with them, I think it really does come down to that intended desire to just start fresh every time. And really, that's all I've got. If you want to discuss this below in a civil manner, hey, feel free to leave a comment. I'd be happy to talk to you. If you just want to tell me that, you hated it, it ruined your childhood, blah, 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 there's plenty of Reddit blogs for that. In the meantime, though, I bid you adieu, and happy